Do you want your track to have this appearance? Or perhaps you prefer this appearance? If you like the others, you should find another video to watch. If you want to have this sort of appearance, please stay tuned, because today we're going to talk about ballasting. You're watching the Norfolk Southern Sherwood Subdivision. This video is part of a series about improvements to the town of Sherwood. In the previous video, we painted the track. This video is about ballasting the track. Properly installed ballast will give your track a realistic appearance. Conversely, poor or sloppy ballast work will detract from your layout's appearance. So now we're going to look at some ballast. The ballast you're seeing in the video is the one that's on my layout right now. We also have a photograph here of actual ballast in a railroad near me. Additionally, we have a photograph of track that has been painted but not ballasted. And I think you can see that ballast immeasurably improves the appearance of your layout. In order to do proper ballasting, we of course need ballast. If you look on the internet, you'll find things like a Walther search for ballast yields 414 hits, Scenic Express 140, Woodland Scenics 48, and my preferred vendor for ballast, Arizona Rock and Minerals, 138. So there are lots to choose from. And the issue you might have with buying on the internet has to do with color rendering on the internet, which is notoriously poor. So what should you do? Well, my recommendation is to do what you're seeing here. I purchased a number of different kinds of ballast, and I put them on track, which is painted, and I looked at them on my layout, in my lighting, and that helped me to choose. And what I ultimately chose was this ballast here and this ballast here. So who's my vendor of ballast? My friends from Arizona Rock and Minerals made ballast selection a whole lot easier because you can get from them a sample pack. You see an example of what they provide. Little packages of various kinds, colors, textures of ballast. So this makes it much easier for you to make a proper selection. And in fact, I use these small packages that I receive from them to do the sample track that we saw earlier. After choosing from the sample pack from Arizona Rock and Minerals, I came up with these two choices. Mainline, UP Silverton, I guess that is, Western Pacific Bold Gray. For my yard and my industrial tracks, Steam Era Mix for yard. Now you'll notice that neither of these has anything to do with the layout that I'm doing, which is a Norfolk Southern prototype in the current era. So don't pay too much attention to the names. Just take a look at the kind of ballast it is and whether it's suitable for your layout. So let's begin some ballasting. This is the track that we painted in the last episode. Now normally I'd do the back first because then you don't have to lean over the front that has ballast on it already. For this example, I'll do the front. First step, spread some ballast in between the gauge of the rails. Take a soft paintbrush and spread it out. What you're trying to do is get it to the level of below the tops of the ties. Remember, this is a main line, so it would be pretty clean. And you're trying to get it out of the web of the rail, and that'll take a little while. So just start moving this around carefully. You know, we see things on YouTube about, oh, here's a fast way to do ballasting. I think that's a mistake. Because ballasting, if done properly, at least in my experience, is going to take a while, and you have to be really careful. Otherwise, you end up with a sloppy job that you're going to regret later on. So, trying to get it off the tops of the rails. to get out of the web of the rail, and this is where your fingernail can come in really handy. It's never going to be perfect. There will always be some cleanup required afterwards. So just keep at it until you get something that's suitable. Yeah, that's not bad. Excuse me. There will be, of course, the necessity to do some cleanup later on. But for the time being, we are going to put the ballast in place. And to do that, we are going to use two products. We are going to use 70% isopropyl alcohol, and that will provide serve as a wetting agent so that the Woodland Scenic Cement can actually, I know you can't see that very well, will actually penetrate the ballast. So, first step, get a small pipette like this one. There are larger ones that are sold. I don't recommend them because they tend to blast the ballast out of place. Load up your pipette, then going along the outside of the rail, insert and introduce the 70% isopropyl alcohol. And we want on the outside of the rail so as not to disturb what's in place. Now this will need a few moments to soak in. And you can tell if it's soaked in, the ballast where it's soaked in becomes darker. For example, this point right here is not dark enough. It needs more isopropyl alcohol. While that's soaking in, we'll get out our Woodland Scenic Cement, shake it up really well. And you know when it's shaken well enough, because you can't see the residue on the bottom. Bottles have been sitting around for a while, either on your supply or in a hobby store. May need this shaking more than normal. And we're going to choose a different pipette, not the one that we use for the alcohol. We're going to do the same thing. Load up the pipette with the Scenic Cement, outside of the rails, and we'll let it wick in. Other side, do this carefully and slowly. You don't want to blast the ballast out of place. And I should tell you that once you get this ballast wet, don't try to repair it, fool around with it. Don't even touch it. Because if you do that, whatever you're trying to fix, you'll just make worse. And you can tell if the ballast is soaked in enough, rather the Scenic Cement is soaked in enough, because the ballast will assume a white appearance, as most of it has in this case. All you do now is let it dry. Probably let it dry for 24 hours. The next step we're going to take, we're going to address the shoulders. And we'll do a two-step process to address the shoulders, but that's going to have to wait until continuing with our ballast, and what we're trying to do is overcome the common fear of model railroaders, ballast phobia. It is the unreasonable fear of ballasting. So as you saw in the previous session, we ballasted the web of the rail, let it dry overnight. Now we are going to attack the shoulders. First step in doing so, we're going to paint the shoulders. What I have here is white glue, otherwise known as PVA glue for those of you in the rest of the world, known as Elmer's glue in the United States. And we're going to paint it on the side of on the shoulder here. And what we're going to do is pour some ballast over top of that. If you don't do this, what happens is you put a huge amount of ballast on the shoulder and most of it falls off. So what we're going to do is put a light coat of ballast here, and that'll serve as a tooth, if you will, for the rest of the ballast that we'll put on later. So I'll just paint that on, trying to keep it off the ties. That should be good enough for right now. Then we take our ballast and we pour it over that. Just a light coat. We're not really trying to ballast the shoulders in its final form. What we are trying to do is provide something for the ballast to stick to when we do the final project. Now a lot of that won't stick, and we'll clean it up. But first we have to let it dry. Glue having dried, it's now time to vacuum it up. Now we could use the shop vac and just throw it away, or we can use the sock method. Ballast is expensive, can't afford to waste it. Now, what you see that we have is a little bit of a rough surface. And that's going to allow our ballast to stick more easily when we build the shoulder. So we'll start doing that now. Take our ballast, and the first thing we want to do is put it in here at the ends of the ties. And what we're looking for is the same appearance that we had before. Now then, we're going to build the slope. I'm going to put some ballast in here, then we're going to shape it. You can use a lot of things. A good shaping tool is this, because it's a foam paintbrush. It has this angle that's about the angle that we want for our ballast. We don't want any sharp edges, but we do want the roadbed to be completely covered. So where we need to, we'll add some ballast. And you can see through our shaping process, our ballast is coming together. So you continue to do that until the cork's no longer showing and you have a profile that appeals to you. And you might want to have to sight down the track or do other such things until you get something that you like. I'll just clean up this area a little bit. And we're ready to put the ballast into place with our scenery method. It's the same process, a two-step process. First of all, a pipette, 70% isopropyl alcohol. So use the web of the rail as your guide. What you're trying to do is get all the ballast soaked. And if you knock some of those pieces off, remember like I told you before, Once it's wet, don't play with it. We can make some adjustments later if that's necessary. Come in from the bottom and do the same. What you're trying to do, well, actually what you're trying to not do is touch the ballast. See, I got a little bit of a squirt there, which I didn't mean to do. So there may be some need to clean up after this. Give this some time to wick in. And you'll know that it's done when it all turns dark. And you keep putting alcohol in here until you're satisfied. That all looks pretty dark, so that's what we're looking for. And we'll let that set for a couple minutes. Meanwhile, we'll get our Scenic Cement out. Do the same thing that we did before. Give it a good shake. Make sure that things aren't on the bottom. Bottom looks clear. And we're going to use the same technique we used when we did the gauge of the rail. And we're going to do this the very same way we just did the alcohol. Top and along the bottom. You notice we have an irregular shape along the bottom. That's okay, actually, because you very seldom see straight line. All right, that looks pretty good. Now what do we do? Well, with this section, we're essentially done. What we would, of course, do is the other side using the same method. And then we would just continue up and down the track. After this is all dry, which we have to give it another day, we'll go in and do a little cleanup and get some of this extra that's floated up, you know, notice that, into the web of the rail and on top of the ties. And remember, this track has been painted, so if we rub a little paint off, we might have to do some touch-up painting. So, that is the method that one would use to ballast track when the track is on a tangent or a curve and there are no turnouts involved. When it comes to doing turnouts, we'll use the same method, but I'll show you a couple of things that you need to be aware of when doing turnouts. Just a quick view of our track after we've done the cleanup. You can see we've removed almost all the ballast that wasn't where it was supposed to be on top of the ties or in the web of the rail. What we have not yet done is the touch-up painting that was required. So that's the complete picture of how it looks from start to finish when you're doing tangent track or track on a curve not involving a turnout. Well, there's a turnout, or a point as others call it in the rest of the world. And we have to ballast it too, otherwise our ballasting job is going to look a little strange. What will we do? Well, we're going to do pretty much the same thing. We're going to put ballast in the gauge of the rails. Right along here, we're going to ballast the shoulders, just as we did in our example. We're going to put ballast in here between the points, but we're going to make sure that that ballast is below the tops of the ties. Likewise, we'll put ballast in here where the points and the stock rails meet, in the same way. If ballast is sticking up from the ties at that point, the turnout won't work. What we will not do is put any ballast between the head blocks right here. We're going to stop here and start our ballasting down here on the other side of the head blocks. And the reason for that is two things. First of all, the Scenic Cement will glue the points to the stock rail, and you don't want that. The worst part is the Scenic Cement will get in where the electrical contacts occur, and you won't have any power to the rest of your turnout if it's a power routing turnout. So no ballast in here. Third point, if you're using tortoise switch machines, there's a big hole right here. And you pour ballast in there, it's going to end up on the floor in your switch machine. That'll make it even worse. So, no ballast in that area. Another area to be concerned about, the guardrails. If you fill this area up with ballast, your wheels will rise above the ties and above the track, and you'll have derailments. The summary is, ballasting at turnout is not much different from regular ballasting, except you have to be more careful to make sure that the turnout continues in operation after you're done with your ballasting. A couple of final notes about ballasting. First of all, on YouTube, there are numerous, I didn't even try to count them, videos about ballasting. Some are good, some are not good. Choose what you like. If you want to see a really professional job of ballasting, go to modelrailroader.com and search for ballast and look for ballasting done by a fellow called Cody Grivno, G-R-I-V-N-O. He is the master of ballasting. And he will show you techniques similar to what I showed you. He's really good at it. It's really well presented. So before you do any ballasting, obviously I hope you watch this video and go visit Mr. Grivno and he will give you some additional information. That concludes our session on ballasting. I clearly have more to do. A lot more, like 20 feet thereof. And I'll continue to work on that. Hope you enjoyed this video about ballasting, and if you would like to see more videos in our series of improvements to the town of Sherwood, or operations videos that we have done, please consider subscribing to this channel.